Hi, my name is Jacqueline Wahardo, and today I'm going to be talking about the interviews that I conducted for the Mental Health and Emotional State Survey. So, for my three interviews, I interviewed three individuals who were of different ages. I wanted to do this because I believe that it would give me a little bit of more insight, and I would also be able to see either the differences or similarities between these individuals. So, for this assignment, I chose to interview someone who was in their 20s, someone in their late 30s, and someone over the age of 60. For all of my interviews, I did the same questions and used the material not only from the syllabus but also in our readings to be able to really get information that was very helpful and useful as I was conducting this interview, and also to help me as a way to guide me as I was having these conversations with these three individuals. For all of my interviews, the first question that I started off with was the one from the syllabus, which was, what have you found to be the most challenging aspect of the COVID-19 health crisis and why? And one of the things that I noticed is that there was differences because all of these individuals found themselves in different states, whether it be physically, emotionally, or mentally. So, for example, the person that I interviewed who was in their late 30s was a teacher and is still a teacher now. And one of the things that she noted was that she thinks and believes that it hurt her students' mental health and also well being. She has noticed that they have become more dependent on technology and negative self coping skills. Personally, for herself, she also noticed that the impact it had on her was greater than she initially thought. She also had to work through a lot at the height of the pandemic and whenever we were self isolating. She said that during this time of self isolation, she did find herself struggling to not gravitate towards negative coping skills and really had to work on putting her energy into something positive and really having to self reflect and deal with a lot of internal emotions that she had not dealt with, that she had put off. For my other interviewer, who is in their 20s, she was living out of state at the time and her family was in a different state. So she was in Kansas while her family was in Oklahoma. She told me that this was incredibly difficult for her because she could not travel to see them as often as she wanted to, because her parents are older and did run a higher risk of being, having to self isolate for much longer and possibly being infected by the virus, which did happen in one of the family visits that occurred. Even though tests had come back negative, her father did become very ill, which was very bad because he was in remission at the time because he had been battling cancer. And so all of these health scares that were occurring for her father really want to encourage her to be even more cautious. But that also meant that she wasn't able to see her family as much as she was used to and would have liked to during one of the times that was absolutely lonely, and she felt alone and isolated, and it just felt like super dark times, not just for her but for everyone. And my last interviewer, who was over the age of 60, he was battling with different health issues. And so, when we were at the height of the pandemic, he was following all regulations, ensuring that he wasn't having any visits or any contact with anyone who could really put him at risk. At the same time, this was isolating because it was just him and his wife that were together in the home, since all of their children are older and have moved away, so they didn't get to see their grandchildren as much and were alone during this time. And this was a very, very hard time for them, and they had to learn how to navigate this and also navigate essentially being alone for months on end. And the second question that I asked all of my interviewers was how they've noticed a change in the environments that been in, whether that be at work, socially, and within their families. And one of the things that I noticed is that in this particular question, there was similarities across the board. Everyone talked about how they noticed that everyone was a little bit more agitated and on edge, and even they themselves had a smaller fuse and felt that they would, maybe have emotional outbursts that they would have normally had just because of the intense living conditions and environments. From our readings that we have been doing in the myth of being normal, it talks a lot about these tensions and how all of the stressors that we deal with. And the one aspect that I found very interesting was the portion about capitalism and how capitalism actually is not just about money, and it goes far beyond that. It goes far beyond politics. It goes into sports, into all aspects of our way of living, and this culture of being pit against each other, and this sense of feeling behind or not doing enough, and everything always being a competition. And as I was talking, especially to my interviewee who was in their 20s, she did say that she did feel this way, especially during the pandemic at the height of it. And even now, as she's still processing everything that she went through during that time, that she has had this feeling of falling behind, this sense of I'm not doing what others in my age are doing. I am now divorced. I have no children. I am approaching my 30s, and I have not accomplished some of the goals and stuff that some of my other peers have been able to do. And my other two interviewees spoke about the situation within their family and how a lot of the dynamics have changed, and they've noticed how there's been a lot of negative impacts that have happened because of all of the strains on people's emotional health and mental state. And they also have noticed how in many of the gatherings, it seems that at the beginning there would be a lot of fights that would erupt. And so they've learned to navigate through all this and realize that what they were feeling, what they were experiencing, was a part of a lot of the emotions that they have been holding within. And across the board, all of my interviewees said that at the height of the pandemic, when we were all isolating, that a lot of these emotions they've had to face. And so that whenever they once were in social gatherings, whenever they were back with their families, since they were still navigating through those feelings and working through that, that also played a factor in their short fuse and some of the eruptions that happened. But they all acknowledged that within all that, there would be moments that, whether it be as individuals by themselves or as families, they also took the time to say, we're all going through it. We're all experiencing something right now. And I found that very interesting because for a lot of them, when I asked this question, it was just like this sigh of, let me tell you, there's been so much. I don't even know where to begin. And I just got this sense of all of the emotion that they had been experiencing and are still experiencing and navigating towards. And as we kept talking about that, we then started talking more about faith and how that has played a part in their mental health. What role does it play? And I noticed that for all of them, it was different when it came to this question. My younger interviewee in their 20s talked to me about actually that during this time, they strayed away a little bit from their faith. They no longer tuned in to online church. They would read a devotional every now and then, but this time, and still right now, they are working through their faith and they are navigating that, and they are trying to see what faith means to them. what a relationship with God looks like for them. And they have really been reconstructing and deconstructing their beliefs. My interviewee, who is in their late 30s, spoke to me about how her faith really isn't everything that she does, and it is so, so important for her. But some of the other things that are also important for her is her family, and that also played a factor in her faith. So going back to the height of the pandemic, she said that what they would do as a family, they would call each other, or they would gather on FaceTime or Zoom, and they would, listen to the service online together. Or if they didn't do that, they would watch it all at the same time and then talk together afterwards. And that really helped her faith, and that really helped her continue moving forward. And the gentleman who was over the age of 60 spoke to me that his faith has and is one of the most important things in his life. It is the thing that gives him strength. It is what helps him move forward and be a better person. And it is part of every aspect of his life, his health, his mental health, everything. He really tries to be disciplined in the spiritual practices that he has in the mornings and in the evenings. And those two things, those spiritual practices that he does, have really helped him stay firm, but also have given him comfort. And the other question also that we discuss is how they stayed balanced and what other things they use for their wellness. So aside from faith, they all told me of a variety of hobbies. The gentleman told me that he does a lot of woodwork and he does a lot of walking with his wife. My interviewee, who is in their late 30s, told me, she's a teacher, so that is a part. So she loves to teach, so she really made sure that her lessons were interactive and fun. And not only that, but as she was creating these lessons, she translated that to her own life and her own balance. And so she made sure that she does something that is also interactive, and she's out there. She loves to golf, she loves to socialize, and she also volunteers helping with the community theater, and she is very active and involved. She says that that also goes along with her faith, and she sees this balance between her spiritual life and her physical health as well, because she's doing a lot of walking, a lot of exercise, carrying around props. And so all of those things help her keep moving forward. They help her keep her spirits up, and also that community that she is a part of, whether it be in theater or the church. These communities have really helped her in some of her lowest points in her life. And my interviewee, who is in her 20s, actually spoke to me about trying to figure out what balance looks like, because she doesn't know. She's trying to figure out a full-time job on top of making sure she's paying all her bills, and also trying to find her new hobby, and trying to be social and dating and navigating life post-divorce. And it's been a struggle for her. She says that she doesn't know what balance really is right now in her life. She says that she doesn't even know what hobbies she likes. She is having to rediscover so many parts of herself right now, and it's been hard for her, and it has taken a toll on her mental health and her emotional state, because sometimes she feels like she doesn't know who she is. She feels like she's lost her sense of identity, and that's been really hard. And as we were having this conversation, she's spoken to me about trying new things, and how trying new things isn't always easy for her, but she's pushing herself, and she's willing to do it, and she's trying to do the work to find that balance. And all of my interviewees, even my older gentleman and my interviewee who is in their 30s, even they talked about having difficulty finding that balance, having to learn every year what that balance looks like, and how it changes. It changes every year, week to week, month to month. But the one thing that stays consistent in their life is their rock. which is their faith, which is God, and the community that they have found within church. And that has then helped them find balance with all the other things that they do to sustain their life, whether it be exercise, volunteering, woodwork, walking, all of these things. They really connect with their faith, and they say that because of that, they've been able to find some balance. It doesn't mean that they always have it perfectly well managed, but that they have learned more about themselves to know what is working and what is not, what is filling their cup and what is draining them, which I think is so important. And so, out of all of these interviews, they all gave me such truthful and honest answers. I had long conversations with each and every single one of them, and I could make a longer video just discussing all of these interviews, individually and going into them. But we talked about the stressors in their lives. We talked about the role money plays in their life, their gender, their race. And these are all things that we've also been reading about. And particularly talking about stressors in our readings, there was a really good quote that stuck with me and that I also share with my interviewees. And it says, all stressors represent the absence or threatened loss of something an organism perceives as necessary for survival. An impending loss of food supply, for example, is a major stressor for any creature. So is for our species the absence or threatened loss of love or work or dignity or self-esteem or meaning. And that comes from page 279 of our readings. And after reading this quote to them, they said that they definitely agreed with this and that they actually saw that within their lives with certain stressors, and how, whenever they don't feel good enough, whenever they don't feel great about themselves, whenever they might not even feel loved, it's often during this time of a lot of stress, when there's a lot of other components that are affecting their well-being, whether it be because of the competitive nature of our world, which we talk about in our readings, being felt like they're being put against one another, that they're competing against everyone and can't trust anyone. And all of the stressors in their lives sometimes lead them to dark moments in their life. But also, whenever they do feel that they are not connected, whether it be to God or to their partner or to their community, they do really begin to feel this sense of being lost. They do begin to feel that absence, and they begin to see the danger that it can cause in their life when they're not maybe maintaining that balance, whenever they're not doing what they need to for their mental health, for their emotional state, whether it be asking for help, seeking treatment. I know my interviewee, who is in their 20s, told me that she has actually started therapy and has been very helpful for her to navigate all of these different emotions. And so, in all of the conversations that I had, we also touched on isolation and feeling alone and this feeling of loneliness. And I found it very interesting that in our readings on page 296, it talked about that Americans now identify themselves as lonely has doubled from 20 to 40% since the 1980s, which is a huge jump. And even as we are handling things with COVID-19 and seeing the repercussions now, this is something that all of my interviewees acknowledged and noticed, this sense of loneliness. And especially my younger interviewee in her 20s, she definitely said that she has identified as lonely, that she has felt lonely. She does feel lonely even now. And it's very difficult sometimes to express those emotions. But I'm so grateful that she was able to talk to me a little bit about that, and that all of these interviewees were able to share their stories and their struggles with me, and how they are handling their mental health and what they do that really fills them and helps them emotionally, spiritually. And all of these interviews were just so inspiring. Thank you so much, and I hope that you receive this video and enjoy all of the content.